Lee Mooring on board the USS Yorktown conducting an oral history interview. Today's date is October 1st, 2015. And would you state your name for the record, sir? Oh, you're telling me it's actually October 2nd? Okay. Can you state your name for the record, sir?
I'm Arthur R. Leach.
Great. And when and where were you born?
I was born in Morris, Illinois on May 1st, 1920.
Okay. And do you remember hearing about Pearl Harbor?
I heard about Pearl Harbor around 2 o'clock on a Sunday. There were 40 of us living in my fraternity house, and we had just gotten up more or less from Sunday lunch, and President Roosevelt was on the radio, and you could hear a pin drop when he said that. And the 40 of us were all in service come September.
Mm. What college were you at?
I went to Illinois Wesleyan in Bloomington, Illinois, a denominational school or affiliated at that time.
So did you get drafted or did you join the Navy?
I joined the Navy. I had had my draft physical in February, and I had passed, and I went to the draft board and asked if they were going to allow me time to graduate, and the first thing the director said was, "Did you pass?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "You'll be gone in 2 weeks." And I went out, slammed the door, broke the glass, and left.
So why did you choose the Navy over the other branches?
I think the reason primarily was out of a lot of my fraternity brothers, several of them had become Navy pilots or been part of the Marine Corps, and quite frankly, I didn't want to slop in the mud.
Well, that's a good enough answer. So where did you do your basic training?
When I got called, which was 2 days after I graduated, I was second class, I believe. They had started what they called pre-flight school, and I'm positive in the second class to appear at the University of Iowa. And we were there about 3 months. We called it the Muscle Factory. And you did ground school a half a day, and you did exercises, sports, and hiking, and that the other half the day. After 3 months, I got sent to St. Louis for primary flight training. Took about 3 or 4 months there, and I think January I got sent to Pensacola for advanced training, and finished that in May of '43, got my wings, got my commission, got sent to fighter training in Miami. When I finished that, I got sent to Glenview up here near Chicago for carrier landings in Lake Michigan on those small converted cargo ships.
So after you finished all your training, what was your first assignment?
I was assigned to landing signal officer school in Jacksonville. And I went through that. Maybe that's why I was always able to land on the carrier. But they found they had enough of those, so they sent me back to fighters, and I joined Air Group 3 in San Diego.
And from there, where did you go?
They sent Air Group 3 up to Seattle, and then from Seattle they sent us to Whidbey Island, which isn't far, in Puget Sound, and from there they moved us to Pasco. And when we left Pasco, we went to board the ship in San Francisco, and they sent us out to the wonderful world of Hawaii, and that we were training there for probably 4 months on every island. Didn't chase girls.
So when did you find out you'd be getting on the Yorktown?
While we were in the Hawaiian area, we were waiting for the Yorktown to come, and as I say, it took us about 4 months there, and when Yorktown was ready to go out, why, we flew aboard, and we practiced on the way out the rest of the way. We lost a few guys in operational. We ended up losing 31 out of 105.
Just in your training?
All of them were operational or anti-aircraft. There wasn't a one lost to an enemy aircraft. We shot 91 enemy aircraft down. And I fortunately, along with another gentleman, got credit for shooting the first one down.
Wow. So was this when you were first aboard the Yorktown, or was this before you got on board?
Oh no, this was from the Yorktown. We were out in the Philippine area.
So this was one of your first assignments while on board?
Probably, I don't just recall. But we flew about every other day, and sometimes 2 or 3 times a day. Usually started before sunup and had pre-dawn launches. And they were always nice enough to launch us about 200 or 300 miles from the target. So you had a lot of water to cross.
So what was your first impression of the Yorktown when you got on it?
Oh, it was fascinating, and of course easy to get lost. Still is.
I get lost.
I can imagine. It all looks alike in there.
It does.
Yeah.
So let's back up for a second. So how did you select to become a pilot, or did they pick you to go through the training?
No, I went directly into the pilot program. That was my choice. And as I said, I met a boy from Iowa who was applying the same way, and down in St. Louis there were, I'd say, approximately 500 people applying for the pilot training, and the boy from Iowa and I, the two of us, were the only two that passed that day. The others all reapplied for something else. And of course, everybody wanted what he wanted, and I did not want to be a mudslopper.
So how often would you fly when you were on board the Yorktown?
I'd say every other day. It approximately, and they'd be 4 to 5 hour flights, and usually a couple times a day.
Okay.
All of our pilots were not night qualified, so we who were the ones that got the first and last hop of the day, in case you came back after dark.
Mm. Okay. What was that like, flying the plane in the dark?
No, it's pretty black out there, and moonlight nights were the best, but of course the moon isn't out all the time, but it's sort of hard to tell the water from the sky, and you are navigating the whole time you're out there.
Does your plane have lights on it?
The ship was not
Right, I know the ship
lit,
was not lit.
and we had running lights on, on the end of the
Okay.
wings and on the tail, but when you came back to the ship, you didn't light those, you turned them off. And we never really flew with them because we didn't want to attract the Japanese any more than they wanted us to find them.
Do you remember the first time you got shot at?
Well, they have tracer bullets the same as we. We would load armor-piercing, incendiary, and tracer, and the tracer sort of glows in between and lets you see more or less where your aim is. And the first time one of those went flying by, it lets you know somebody's on your tail, and does make the sweat run down your back.
Oh, boy. So, can you remember the first time that you brought down an enemy plane?
Well, we had, my wingman and I had this one in our sights, and of course they keep turning, and you keep turning with them and trying to cut the circle and shorten it up, and you give a few bursts and you see the tracers go, and you keep trying to get closer and closer, and it gets exciting. I always said that I never really thought of it as shooting at another person. I will always looked at it as the airplane, the airplane, and that was the primary thing. And when he starts to smoke, why, you want to give him a couple more and sort of follow him down, but don't get too close. In case he blows up, why, you can eat all that.
Oh, goodness. So what was it like when you would come back for a landing? Walk me through the process of landing on the Yorktown.
When you come back to the ship and you're navigating, and you're up at 14,000 feet, and you're picking up the radio signal from the ship, and as you home in on him and get close, then you drop down to 1,000 feet or so, and as you all four come across the ship's deck, you wave your wings and you break up the group, 1, 2, 3, 4. Take your interval downwind leg in prop airplanes, and get your altitude, get your speed down, and the ship is going the opposite direction. You have to start your turn ahead and make your curve around, and because of the big engine in front of you, you can't have a long straightaway to the ship to land. you make your turn, roll out, and drop it in right then. And you got to be at the right height and the right speed, because it doesn't take long to drop that 25 feet or so. And hopefully catch a wire right away.
Did you ever have an issue where your plane didn't catch a wire?
I could hear the hook going like that, bouncing. There was 1,200 pounds of pressure on the hook, but occasionally they would bounce. And on occasion, some people, you had a metal tie down across the wooden deck, and if that hook hit the wood just in front of that, it could gouge in and tear the hook part right off of the handle. And of course you had nothing to stop you then, just hit the brakes and nose it in. And when you see the barriers coming up, you know you lost it.
Did that ever happen to you?
Only once, and I caught the last wire. Yeah. And it feels good.
I bet. Did you ever return with damage to your plane?
Not too many big holes, small ones a lot of times. An aircraft fire, the shrapnel sometimes would be close enough and you didn't get the big one, but you got all the pieces. Small holes never bothered. And you could put a hole in that's 3 feet square and it'd still fly fine. Yeah.
So what was your main mission every single time you went out in the plane?
We always had the same armament.